Deep in the heart of Yorkshire, there exists an ancient forest called the Whispering Woods. For centuries, locals have avoided it after dark. They say the woods are alive with whispers, voices speaking a language no one understands. One summer evening, a group of college friends decided to challenge the legend. Jake, Lucy, Ben, and Rachel packed their flashlights and cameras, determined to prove that the whispers were nothing but a myth. As they entered the woods, the first thing they noticed was the eerie silence. The usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves were absent. The deeper they ventured, the darker it became, as if the trees themselves were swallowing the light. Soon, faint whispers surrounded them, too faint to decipher but chilling nonetheless. Ben laughed nervously. "Probably the wind," he said, but his voice betrayed his fear. The group pressed on, following an overgrown path that led to the heart of the forest. Suddenly, Rachel stopped. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Hear what?" Jake replied. "A voice. It said my name." Before anyone could respond, the whispers grew louder. They seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the trees. Lucy clutched Jake's arm. "This isn't funny. Let's go back." But when they turned around, the path they had come from was gone, replaced by dense thickets. Panic set in as the whispers turned into guttural chants. Shadows began to move among the trees, too quick to identify but undeniably there. Then out of the darkness a figure emerged. It was cloaked in rags, its face hidden under a hood. It raised an emaciated hand and pointed at the group. The whispers ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. "Leave!" the figure rasped, its voice like dry leaves. Jake took a step forward. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, it let out a bone-chilling scream. The trees around them seemed to close in, and the ground beneath their feet turned soft and spongy. They ran, not knowing where they were going, only desperate to escape. After what felt like hours, they stumbled out of the woods, collapsing onto the roadside. When they looked back, the forest was silent once more, the whispers and shadows gone. None of them ever spoke of that night again, but they all agreed on one thing. The Whispering Woods was not just a legend. Story number 2. The Haunting of Blackwell Manor. Blackwell Manor had stood abandoned for decades. Once a grand estate, it had fallen into disrepair after the mysterious disappearance of the Blackwell family in 1932. The townsfolk whispered about curses and ghosts, but no one dared enter, until Emma. Emma was an amateur paranormal investigator with a YouTube channel. Determined to uncover the truth about the manor, she and her cameraman, Ryan, decided to spend the night there. The air was thick with dust as they stepped inside. The grand staircase was crumbling, and the walls were covered in peeling wallpaper. Emma set up her equipment in the main hall, while Ryan filmed everything. As night fell, strange things began to happen. Footsteps echoed from the floor above, even though they were alone. Doors creaked open and slammed shut without warning. Emma's EMF reader spiked wildly. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, barely audible. But as midnight approached, they grew louder, more insistent. "Get out," a voice hissed. Emma's bravado wavered. "Did you hear that?" she asked Ryan, who nodded, his face pale. Suddenly, the chandelier above them began to sway, even though there was no wind. It crashed to the floor, narrowly missing them. They decided to leave, but the front door wouldn't budge. Panic set in as the whispers turned into anguished screams. A shadowy figure appeared at the top of the stairs. It was a woman, her face obscured by a veil. She pointed at Emma and Ryan, her voice echoing through the hall. "You shouldn't have come." The temperature plummeted as the figure descended the stairs. Emma and Ryan backed away, but the figure kept coming. Just as it reached them, everything went black. When Emma woke up, she was outside the manor, her equipment scattered around her. Ryan was gone. Despite extensive searches, he was never found. Emma deleted her channel and moved away, but she could never forget the terror of Blackwell Manor. Story number 3. The Forgotten Asylum. In a remote corner of Pennsylvania lies the remains of St. Mary's Asylum. Once a facility for the mentally ill, it was shut down in the 1950s after reports of abuse and mysterious deaths. Over the years, it became a magnet for thrill seekers and ghost hunters. Lisa, Mark, and Tom were urban explorers looking for their next adventure. Armed with flashlights and a map of the asylum, They decided to explore its crumbling halls. The asylum was a labyrinth of decay. Graffiti covered the walls, and broken furniture lay scattered everywhere. As they ventured deeper, they found patient records, handwritten notes filled with pleas for help. The air was thick with the smell of mold and something metallic. In the basement, they found a room filled with rusted medical equipment. Mark picked up an old scalpel. "Creepy," he muttered. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. Their flashlights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the room. A low growl echoed from the shadows. Lisa screamed as a figure emerged. It was a man, or what was left of one. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He wore a tattered hospital gown stained with blood. "Help me," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Tom tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The figure moved closer, its bony hand reaching out. Mark swung his flashlight, but it passed through the figure as if it weren't there. The room filled with the sound of screams, not just theirs, but dozens of others. Faces appeared in the walls, their mouths open in silent agony. Somehow, the door opened, and they ran, leaving their equipment behind. When they reached their car, they found scratches on the doors and windows, as if something had tried to claw its way inside. None of them ever returned to the asylum, but Lisa claimed to hear whispers and see shadowy figures in her home. The others dismissed it as trauma, but deep down, they knew something had followed them. Country number 4. The Curse of the Old Lighthouse. Off the coast of Maine stands an old lighthouse, abandoned after its keeper vanished in 1903. Locals claim it's cursed, but that didn't stop Eric, a photographer, from visiting. Eric was drawn to the lighthouse's rugged beauty. He arrived just before sunset, determined to capture its eerie charm. As he climbed the spiral staircase, he noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols he didn't recognize. At the top, he found the keeper's logbook. The final entry read, "The light has gone out, but they still come. I can hear them in the waves." As night fell, Eric set up his camera. The wind howled, and the waves crashed against the rocks below. Suddenly, the light in the tower flickered on, even though there was no power. Eric heard footsteps behind him. He turned, but no one was there. Then came the sound of chains dragging across the floor. A voice whispered in his ear, "You shouldn't have come." Panicking, Eric tried to leave, but the staircase seemed endless, twisting and turning in impossible ways. The walls closed in, and the air grew thick with the smell of salt and decay. At the bottom, he found himself on the rocky shore, the lighthouse towering above him. Figures emerged from the sea, their eyes glowing and their bodies dripping with water. They surrounded him, their voices a chorus of anguish. Eric's camera was found washed up on the shore weeks later, its memory card intact. The photos showed shadowy figures and glowing eyes, but Eric was never seen again. The lighthouse remains abandoned, its light still flickering on stormy nights.